Hi folks, welcome back to the Tabletop's Edge. We're picking up today right where we left off last time at the conclusion of the political phase. I have rolled for initiative, and the fascists won initiative. The Democrats will be going second, with the communists bringing up third position. I also rolled for weather, and as typical, it being January, February, the expectation is bad weather. And I rolled a 1 for the weather, which would have given us the best weather possible. We're still getting the best weather possible. It's just not quite going to be fine in North Temperate because we had a +2 to the die roll as a modifier from the previous weather roll, which made it a net 3. Still, the weather is going to be better than expected. It's storm in the Arctic, but it's rain in North Temperate and South Monsoon. It's fine everywhere else. So there may be an opportunity here for Germany to attempt to exploit or expand the progress they made at the very end of the November-December turn. But before we get to any of that, we also need to take a look at the reinforcements for everyone this turn, and we'll be looking at this wedge of the reinforcement circle. You can see the Americans here are going to be getting the USS Hornet in the construction pool, while the Japanese are adding not one but 2 fleet carriers in the Kagi and Tsuikaku. They'll also get a carrier plane, which I'll put in the reserve pool for now. Looks like they've got at least a couple of pilots. I think they have 3 available pilots, so I think we'll see that carrier plane as well as another one come out to man the carriers. They get a Marine division, keeping with the rest of the fascists. The Germans are going to get a twin-engine fighter, which will go in the pool for now, but I'm sure that'll come out, as well as a good single-engine fighter and a fair Stuka, although a 4 tactical rating right now is actually among the better tactical bomber ratings you'll see in the game. So a big potential turn for the Luftwaffe, and it looks like they do have 3 pilots, so I'd expect to see all 3 of those aircraft go on map. They won't have as big an impact as they normally would because of the rain, but the Luftwaffe is continuing to sort of gear up and expand and get to the point where it can establish some dominance in the air over the battlefield in eastern France. Speaking of France, the French are going to get 2 units. They're going to get a pretty nice mountain unit and a decent infantry corps that was shattered, I believe, last turn in November, December. The Spanish Republicans get a rare reinforcement in the form of an infantry division. That's probably about all they can expect to get now that they're down to merely 2 build points. The Soviet Union gets a motorized corps, and then the Commonwealth sees the Wavell, the HQ armor show up, and they get the HMS Mauritius into the construction pool. And that is going to do it for the January-February reinforcements. Not a lot. If I'm honest, you can see here we've got about six land units and maybe 3 aircraft for the Germans and a couple of carrier planes for the Japanese. If you look ahead here into March, April, May, June, you can see that the war production is gearing up for everybody as more and more units are appearing on the circle. So I'm going to go ahead and place the reinforcements now, and then we'll be in a position to kick off with the Axis in impulse number 1. We'll start off with the Spanish nationalists down in sunny Spain. The weather here is fine, and they are using the combined limits of the Italians, who really don't have much going on. The limits will give them 3 land moves. There are no naval moves that they're going to be engaging in. They will use 2 of the 3 land moves to shift 2 of their corps here. They are continuing their operations to reduce the Republican stronghold here in the east that's based on Valencia. And I think we got 1, 2. They're going to use a 3rd one. Do the Italians have anything they really need to move? The answer is no. So I guess they will go ahead and Get the land movement there. And actually, before I did that, getting a little bit ahead of myself, they should have done their ground strikes. They do have one ground strike here. They are going to fly their SM-79 bombers in a ground strike mission on this hex. Now, the Republican Air Force has been eliminated. They don't have any aircraft on map to intercept it, so this is just going to be a straight up 3 rolling on the 2 targets. The red die will be the top unit, the green die will be the bottom unit. We're looking for a 3 or less to flip them face down. And the bombers did rather well. 2 and a 1, that's going to invert both of the defenders, which is bad news for the Republicans, as that will give the Nationalists a +2 on any attack they make against these face-down units. Let's see. One of the issues with the game, physically it's a beautiful addition. However, the size of the die cut on the counters is not terribly consistent, which makes it real tricky when trying to manipulate stacks of units with tweezers. There's a good example there where the motorized core is just a little bit smaller than the cavalry core. Anyway, moving on, we have our ground strikes out of the way. We've got the land movement done. There's no air transport, debarking of land units at sea, invasions, or paradrops, which is going to bring us right to land combat. And with that, the Nationalists are going to follow up the ground strikes with an attack from these 3 hexes on the units here that are in the mountain hex. Let's see if I can move this without making a total mess. We'll slide these out here eventually. There you go. You can see it's a mountain hex. The defenders' strength, they had a 5 strength motorized corps and a 3 strength cavalry corps for a total of 8. That's going to be doubled to 16 because of the mountains. And attacking that, the Nationalists are able to bring 9, 11 with the artillery, 16, 21, and in the 3rd hex we've got 26 and 4 for a total of 30. Now 30 to 16 right now should put them on the 3 to 2 column. However, before we get to the resolution, the Nationalists are going to be using Franco to add offensive HQ support, which then will trigger the Republicans to have Azania provide some defensive HQ support in order to offset Franco. That's going to even out there. And finally, since there are no Republican fighters to worry about, they are going to send in, the Nationalists are going to send in their Chiris as fighter bombers. They're going to add the 2 tactical factor to the 30 land factors for a total of 32 to 16, which will in fact push it up to a 2 to 1, and then +2 because we have 2 face down defenders in the hex. So a 2 to 1 +2. This is actually one of the better attacks we have seen, I think, in the entire Spanish Civil War, and perhaps an indicator of just how poorly things have been going for the Republicans. So 2 to 1 +2, really a 50-50 chance to clear the hex. Let's see what happens here. And I think they're going to do it. That is a 7. +2 becomes a 9 on the 2 to 1 on the assault table. It is no loss to the Nationalists, 1 loss to the Republicans, and an S result. So 1 will be shattered and 1 will be destroyed. I think we know what they're going to choose. They will shatter the motorized corps here and destroy the cavalry corps. Now, there's no losses for the Nationalists. However, they just failed to keep anyone face up. So this is probably going to be the extent of Nationalist activity this turn. They do, however, gain another hex on Valencia here. Everyone will be turned face down. Go ahead and take care of that after they advance into the hex. So maybe we'll do this, I think. We'll have everyone here, and that's destroyed. I'll put that on the reinforcement circle to arrive next turn as a reinforcement. The question is, where is it going to arrive? And before I forget, we need to turn these guys face down as well. I think that's going to do it. So a I would say, a very successful impulse for the nationalists there, and the end is drawing ever closer here for the Republicans in Valencia and Malaga. So with that, we'll keep it in Europe. We'll slide a little bit to the northeast and take a look and see what the Germans are going to try and do this impulse. Now we come to the main event. At the very end of last turn, the Germans were able to score a bit of a coup here by seizing Metz, taking advantage of a French mistake. Now, unfortunately for the Germans, we're in the middle of winter, although it really doesn't feel like it since it's only rain in North Temperate right now. That's still going to give them a -1 odd shift on any attack, and perhaps more importantly, all of the tactical factors for their aircraft are going to be halved. And looking along the line here, while it was great to grab Metz, it's not as though they've achieved any sort of breakthrough. To the contrary, the Allied or Democrat line is too deep all the way down to the hex here, which would be the Ardennes, or correspond to the Ardennes, where the French have just their Georges HQ. Now, the issue facing the Germans, one of the issues, is that the French still have a pretty strong defensive line here because of the Meuse River that runs along here. So any German attacks across these hex sides into these three hexes are going to be halved because of that river. They've also got some artillery here in reserve that can strengthen the defense in either of these two stacks, and there's very little the Germans can do about that other than ground striking these artillery units, and given the rain, that's going to be rather difficult to do successfully. So the Germans have to kind of think about where they want to push. Obviously, with just a single unit here, that was the case in Metz, and they were able to make the attack succeed despite the Maginot fortress hex sides here. They'd be dealing with just a river hex side, but they're only coming out of one hex. And Georges is a 4, probably going to be at least a 6. They've got some headquarters, I think, on either side that could also contribute to the defense as well. And again, anything coming out of this hex is going to be halved. I think the best the Germans can manage right now from a single hex is 19 or 20, which halved is going to be 10. You plan on this being at least a 6. You're looking at a 1-to-1 best case scenario. Again, being in the forest, there's going to have the ground strike factors in addition to the rain being halved, so they're essentially quartered, which means they basically need a 1 to turn Georges face down. Can't really count on that. So as much as they would love to grab this hex, and really they don't even need to kill Georges, they just need to retreat him out of the hex, and they've got the units to do it, to make an attack on the Blitzkrieg table. But again, at a 1-to-1, they would need to roll an 8 or better without any die roll modifiers to that. So with a 30% chance, that's not terribly likely to happen, and they stand a very good chance of losing at least 1, maybe even 2 units, and that would likely be at least one of their expensive armor or mechanized units to do so. So like I said, as much as they'd love to grab this hex, that actually would get them across the river. It would put Predelat here in a very bad situation, and of course they'd have nothing between them and Paris. Unfortunately for the Germans, I just don't see that happening. So where else are they looking? Up here in the north, again, there's the river line. They've got the Deal here. You've got some reasonably strong defenders in these two hexes here. Plus, if they take those hexes, there is a second line of defenses immediately behind them, and you have fighters of the RAF that can cover this central and northern sector of the line. So the Luftwaffe would be dealing with not just French fighters, but also RAF fighters, and therefore would not have as big an advantage in the air. So they're looking more and more to the south here. Now, they've got a strong hex here. They can make a 1-hex attack here. They would like to take this big stack out, although the reason this stack is so tall is because it's got a lot of ground forces in it that are strong. We'll ignore the aircraft here for the moment, but they have an anti-tank unit here with a nominal strength of 2, but if the Germans use any armor or mech units, that becomes a 4. And if I can get this out without making a huge mess, let's see. There we go. They've got Biot with a 5 and another 5 underneath. So that's a nominal strength of 12, probably a 14 if the Germans are bringing some of their best units into the fight. That's before we add another 3 from the artillery here for a 17. And even if this stack does get inverted, George here would be able to lend his HQ support being adjacent. So in other words, this is a very difficult hex to take. And one of the 2 hex sides, coming from this hex, all the German units will be halved attacking here. So they'd really be making a 1.5 hex attack on a rather substantial hex. Not a high likelihood of success, but again, that would be great if they could take this, because there's a single artillery unit here. There's nothing here. There's only a single unit in this hex. That would really kind of start to crack this line, or at least stretch it to the breaking point. But I don't think that's likely to happen given what the Germans have to work with, plus the fact that they're going to be saddled with a -1 odd shift on top of it. They might be inclined to take the risk at 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 on the not 3-to-1, 3-to-2 on the blitz table, but I don't even think they're going to be able to get that. They're probably looking at a 1-to-1 best case on that hex, and it's just not really something they want to do. They don't want to take a big risk and then hurt themselves in the long run. Again, here it's going to be a similar situation here with this nice artillery unit backing up the 7 defense in this hex. And again, it would be a single hex attack. Now, they do have 18 in there right now. They could make it a 19 to 7. That's a 2-to-1. It's going to be shifted 1 left to 3-to-2. And that's without counting the defending artillery. So what they may end up doing here, this impulse, is probably just trying to clear out the Maginot here, get across the Rhine, get through the fortifications, and get set up to try to blast their way out here on the southern end of the line, and kind of hope for the best with the weather. So what we'll do is, with a land impulse, land type action, they get 4 air missions. I think they are going to fly a couple of ground strike missions. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll bring this guy in 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll see if the French want to come up and try to intercept these ground strikes. Now, for the French, looking at this, they have really allies as a whole. They've got 3 fighters here that are within range. Unfortunately, the Belgian fighters and both of the RAF fighters are just out of interception range, so they could bring at best this 4, and this twin engine 3. But the twin engine 3 happens to be the French, actually I think the Democrats' best bomber, so they'd really rather use this as a fighter bomber than a fighter. So realistically, that means they can bring 2 4s to intercept these bombers. Looking at the German side, they could then in turn intercept with a 6 and a 5, and I think they've got a couple other fighters in these hexes here. So the French would be outnumbered. The German bombers, there are 2 of them. They both have a tactical rating of 2. That's going to be halved for the rain to 1, and it's going to be halved again for the forest in the hex to 0.5. That will round to 1. So they're basically looking at 2 1s. Is it worth it to commit a huge chunk of your fighters for the turn this early on something that's got a low chance of success? The Democrats are going to say probably not. So they choose not to intercept, which means we can proceed right into the ground strike portion of the resolution of the ground strike. We've got a number of units here, including the aircraft. So we've got, looks like 4 altogether. So we'll roll. What I'll do is we'll roll twice against each unit. We'll start top to bottom. We'll roll first against the aircraft. Again, we're looking for a 1, and we got 2 7s there. So the aircraft is fine. Next up is the AT guns. Again, looking for 1s. That's a 10 and an 8. That's not going to do it. Here's kind of the big one, the HQ, and that is, oh, there we did get a 1 and an 8. So looks like if they're going to hit one thing in the hex, they probably grabbed the right one. And then finally the infantry corps, looking for another one somewhere, and yet again they get a 1 and a 9. So actually the bombers were far more successful than I think they had any right to expect to be, and we'll see how this impacts not just this impulse, but the way the rest of this turn is going to play out. I'll go ahead and rebase the German bombers, and then we will be on to rail movement and land movement. I'll take care of all of that, and we'll probably run all the way up through land combat, as I don't see any invasions or paradrops or debarking, any of that kind of stuff. So once I finish up the land movement, we'll pick back up with any potential attacks that the Germans will make this turn, or rather this impulse. Having completed all of the rail and land movement, the Germans do have one attack that they are going to make this turn, and it is going to be here on Strasbourg. They're going to be attacking it from these 5 hexes. This is not as slam dunk an attack as it might appear. Now what they do is they've got 5, 10, and 6. That's 16. That's all going to be halved behind the Rhine. To that 16 is going to be added another, or I'm sorry, to that 8, 16 halved is 8. To that 8 is going to be added another 14 in this hex with the Division von Lieb and the Panzer Corps there. That 14 plus the 8 is a total of 22. They're all attacking across fortification hex side. That's thirded, so 22 divided by 3 is 7.3, and we are going to add the 18 that we have in this hex from the motorized, mechanized, and division. 18 plus 7.3 is 25.3. That's going to round to 25. The defenders have a strength of 4, which makes it right now a 6-1. It's going to be one odd shift down to a 5-1 because of the rain. The Germans are not adding any ground support. They are, however, going to have von Lieb provide offensive HQ support. His 2 factors will, I guess technically I should leave this face up till the end of the combat. His plus 2 factors, that divided by 4 is 1/2. That's going to round up to a 1, so it's a +1 to the attack. The defenders have no HQs that can provide support. They do have 2 aircraft, however, that would be capable of flying some ground support, defensive ground support. Question is, do they want to do that? And I think at this point, the answer is probably pretty clearly no. You know, if they do get through, if they both get through, they're going to be halved. That's 1, that's 1.5, 2.5. That would make the defense a 6.5, a 7 to what we said was 25. That would lower the odds to 3-1, +1. However, they would have to run a massive gauntlet of German fighters to do so, and they would have to commit in an escort role. Basically, these 2 fighters would be the only ones that could make it. So I don't think they want to commit their air forces so heavily to a hex that is probably not going to be in their possession for very long in either case. Still, with a 3-1 +1 on the assault, just a 3 or better still allows the Germans to take the hex. It would invert the Germans, it would inflict some losses, but we don't know how long this turn's going to be, so turning the Germans face down, while that's always helpful, is not necessarily as big a deal as it might be in like a May, June, or July, August turn. And there are going to be, I think, more important hexes for the air to be committed to in the future. So after all that said, the defenders have no HQ support. They also have no ground support, which does leave us on the 5-1 +1. The defenders will choose the assault table, as that does give the best chance of turning the attackers face down, which again, right now, I guess they're kind of playing for time. It also increases the chances of some losses, although it's very, very minor. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and roll 5 to 1 plus 1 on the assault table. Germans are looking for something good. They do not get it, but they do get, I guess, good enough. That's going to be a 3. No losses to the Germans, to 1 loss for the defenders. That will take the hex. That will kill the garrison unit there. However, and this is probably more important, all of the Germans are turned face down. They needed to roll a 4 or better to maintain at least half of their attackers face up. So they'll get the hex. A bunch of guys are going to get turned face down. It's not the end of the world for the Germans because they do have some headquarters units that are still face up and can reorganize these face down units. Do we want, I don't think we want to, I think we'll maybe, do we risk leaving just these guys in now? We'll go ahead and place the division there with them. And I think that will then do it. So a successful attack, a moderately successful attack. I guess the French are probably they got just about everything they could hope for out of that. If the Germans had rolled a 1, it would have cost them that division that just moved in here. And also, can't forget about these guys. Need to turn them face down as well. I think that is probably, just like in Spain, probably going to bring most, if not all, of the activity here in eastern France to an end for the turn, which again will provide the Allies more time to bolster their defenses here, which is the last thing the Germans want to hear. And we can go, we do have 2 air missions left. We are going to, I think, do 2 rebases. I think this guy, make sure we, yeah, we've got 2 there, so we'll fly these guys to here. And that will do it, I think, for Germany's first impulse. Now we need to head over to the Pacific and see what Japan's going to do. Actually, before we go real quick there, almost forgot, we do have some reorganization for the Germans here. Von Bock is going to use his 3 reorganization points to turn these 3 units face up again. And so we've got at least some of those units back face up now. Will that be enough to allow the Germans to continue pushing into France this turn or not? We shall have to wait and see. Where did they? Yep. All right. So these guys go here. All right. With that, now we're ready to go back or over to Asia to see what the Japanese are going to do. The Japanese are going to be taking advantage of the fine weather in North Monsoon, so they will be choosing a land action. They don't have, obviously, any naval activities. They don't have any strategic bombardment or ground strikes, which brings them up to their land movement. There's not going to be too much of that involved other than just a swapping of positions between 16th Army here and the Tokyo Militia. And with that, let's see, make sure there's nothing else really. I think they'll be content with that. That's all mud up there, which is really restricting their movement anyway. So we'll move on from land movement. No air transport, debark, invasions, or paradrops. They are going to make 1 attack here. There's going to be a fairly significant attack here on Changsha. It is a city. It is also a factory city. It's got a defense of 7. It's going to be attacked from these 3 hexes, and if the Japanese can be successful here, it could put the Chinese in a bit of a bad way, since the line, while it's intact, is not very deep nor strong. The attacking units, there's 11 here. The cavalry makes 12. Yamamoto is 20, and the 16th Army makes it 28-7. So right at 4-1. They will commit Yamamoto to provide HQ support. His 4 factors will give it a +1. However, that's going to be offset by the printed factory hex, making it a -1, so a net 0 on the roll. It's just a 4-1, and as usual, the Chinese, sticking with their strategy so far, are going to choose the assault table. So 4-1, straight up on the assault table. This isn't necessarily a gimme for the Japanese, but if they roll well enough, it could be very good for them. And wow, they finally roll really well. That is basically what they were looking for. It is going to be an asterisk 2S result. So the asterisk means everybody stays face up, which is something that we have not really seen from any Japanese attacks, or very many of them at all, this game so far. The 2S means both of the militia units are destroyed. And since Shanghai is no longer controlled by the Chinese, that means that this unit is going to be out of the force pool cups. It's going back into the baggies until such time as the Chinese regain Shanghai or it's liberated. Chongqing, however, will go back into the force pool to be rebuilt. And the Japanese will push forward here, and I think they will they'll put the cavalry there. I think we're going to leave somebody in the mountain hex here, whether it's the face-up infantry corps, bring Yamamoto into Changsha, but then he'll be turned face down, unable to advance any further, but he would allow somebody to be supplied if they push further on. So maybe we'll do that. We'll have to give up the extra combat ability or the combat strength in order to make sure they're supplied and can potentially continue attacking in this turn. So that was a big attack that achieved everything the Japanese were hoping it would. As you can see, there's now a verifiable hole here, and so we'll see what the Chinese respond with. Well, that's going to wrap up the fascist first impulse as a whole, as the Japanese have no reorganization nor any air rebases to undertake. That brings us to the Democrats, and I think we'll stay right here in Asia and do the Chinese impulse before we move back to Europe. The Chinese will be doing a land action as usual. So they have no naval activity, they have no air force. That pretty much brings us up to rail movement, which I don't see any rail movement, and on to land movement. This won't take terribly long. They don't have a lot of units to begin with. They are in a bit of a bind here, though, because they've got this open hole in their line that they need to fill. Now, this is in the North Temperate Zone, which means it's rain up here. Movement costs are doubled. So if the cavalry division moves into here, it will be turned face down, and with a movement of 5, it's the fastest unit the Nationalists have, which means anything they put into this particular hex is going to be face down. Now, the Japanese only have 7 factors they can attack with out of here. The Chinese, if they move the cavalry division up there, they would have a defense strength of 2. That would be a 7-2. That's a 3-1, which would, assuming we get rain on the next Japanese impulse, would drop it to a 2-1, but it would be a +1. And a 2-1 +1 with only a single unit in the hex gives them a fairly decent chance of taking the hex. So they're going to have to, the Chinese are going to have to put a little more into that hex if they want to be sure of holding it. And unfortunately, they can't slide the Chongqing warlord down because, actually, is he a Chongqing warlord? Yeah, they can't slide him down because that's going to open up a hole here. Chang, or the unit underneath him, can't cross this lake hex side, which means they're going to have to come back to this hex before they can make their way southwards. Also, it's rain up here, so anybody who moves is going to be inverted, which means the only option they really have is this 17th Army coming from the forest there where the resource is. That's going to invert them, but it will at least give them a 6 defense strength against a 7, maybe an 8 if the Japanese bring in the aircraft, which won't do them any good, which is a 1-to-1 to start with. It would be a +1, but if there's any sort of weather, which there's likely to be up there, it'll be probably at least a 1-to-2 and no better than that. But now they have an issue here because they've got 12 that they can bring against the cavalry, so they're going to have to, fortunately, thin out the defenses here along the coast. Now, I think what we're going to do is move the 5-3 up there, because the 5-3 will not turn face down since the forest cost is 3 and the weather is fine here. If we had moved the militia unit in there, it would have been face down, giving the Japanese a +1 if they were to attack later this turn. What they really need is to get the militia unit here up into the line as quickly as possible, and unfortunately it looks like the guys here with Chang, they're going to be kind of stuck where they are, unless perhaps we get some snow, something to not impact the movement cost, but even then it's going to be a very slow redeployment around the lake there. So the Chinese have managed to fill the gap and present a solid line again, although it is getting thin in places. And so with that, I think we are going to hop over to Europe and deal with the European Democrats. Here in Europe, for the European democracies, that would be France and the Commonwealth, as well as the Spanish Republicans. The focus for this turn, for the French at least, is going to be reinforcing the line. They may shift some units into different hexes, particularly getting somebody in here with Georges, and then start to build some depth to the line here to keep the Germans from breaking through. I probably won't bother to show you all of the little swapping in and out and movement that's going to happen there. The Commonwealth, however, is going to do a naval. They just received Wavell as a reinforcement here. They will be putting him on the transports right away, putting him into the North Sea to get him onto the continent as soon as possible. They also have the Sydney militia that is getting ready to embark on the Queens. They will be bringing them in from Australia. I think they're over in Perth currently on the west coast there. And then they will be deploying most of the Royal Navy assets out to the sea zones to cover any potential sortie by the Kriegsmarine if the weather gets bad enough this turn. So not a whole lot to see as far as the Democrats go. We'll go ahead and just start moving some of these guys out into the sea zones. And once that's done, basically I'll probably catch back up here at the end of the turn, show you what they've managed to do and where things stand, and then we'll be on to the communists. And if I hadn't mentioned it, the impulse marker is going up 2 boxes after each impulse in this set of impulses due to the weather. So back in just a minute, and we'll take a look at what the Democrats have managed to do. As you can see, things don't look terribly different from the beginning of the impulse. Part of that's due to the weather. The rain doubled all of the movement costs, so the 2 reinforcements that were placed here in Paris could only reach these 2 hexes, which left Georges by himself. So the French went ahead and moved the artillery unit here into the hex to at least give them 2 units in that hex to dissuade any German desperate attacks to try to punch a hole. The Commonwealth sailed most of the Royal Navy. They still have Force H sitting at Gibraltar. That's their probably their largest force, along with Force over in Singapore right now. They've covered they've covered all of the sea zones basically in the European map north of Cape St. Vincent, and they've got some cruisers out in the North Atlantic. The French were also a little bit hampered by the fact that the Luftwaffe did manage to turn both the headquarters and the infantry unit in this hex here face down, preventing them from sort of shuffling or doing even more shuffling along the line. Right now, I think the Allies are just sort of hoping for bad weather to continue, or ideally get worse, shorten the turn, and keep getting some reinforcements on map. Although they are in a bit of financial difficulty right now with having to pay for the declarations of war and bringing the Belgians in, so the French really aren't producing very much at all, which could make for a very long summer for the European Democrats. We shall see. The Commonwealth, aside from deploying the Royal Navy, they did have 3 air missions. They used one to put some wildebeests into the Faroes Gap, and they used a second air mission here to redeploy or rebase the Spitfires 1 hex to the south, which will give them further coverage here in the central sector of the line. And for the record, so far Germany has paid her oil for a land impulse, and the Commonwealth has paid for a naval impulse. None of the other countries that have gone have moved more than a single oil-dependent unit. So that's going to wrap up the Democrats' first impulse, and now we'll take a look and see what the Communists are doing. Over the last few turns, the Soviets have been building up a rather substantial force here on the northern border of Iran, and I think this is the turn where Stalin is going to pull the trigger. You can see the weather zone border here. Everything south of that, all of Iran is in the Mediterranean zone, which means we've got some fine weather, so that won't be an issue. Timoshenko and his unit are in the North Temperate, so it is rain there. That's going to preclude them from moving into the mountains here. However, with the desert hex here, this will be fine weather, and they may be able to get as far as Meshhed. So we'll see. It may be a little bit slower off the mark coming in from the east of Iran, but the Soviets will be declaring war on Iran, which means in the upcoming political phase, they will have to select Russian option number 4, and they will pay for that then, and will implement all of the effect on the minor countries. But for now, I've got to go ahead and dig out the Iranian force pool and see what they're going to start with. It's not going to be much. I would think Zhukov probably has more than enough here to handle whatever the Iranians have, but that's what the Soviets thought historically in 1939 when they attacked the Finns. So we'll see how this is going to end up playing out here in Iran. So back in just a minute once we get the Iranians set up. As you might expect, Iran does not have much of an army to set up. In fact, there are only 2 Iranian pieces in their force pool. We're looking at one of them right here, this cavalry corps, which we will set up in Tehran. The other unit is a reserve unit, which means that Iran can call out those reserves at the beginning of one of their impulses, which is going to have to wait until the looks like the Democrats will be running them. Nobody's going to actually align Iran because nobody is at war with the Soviet Union. So one of the Democrats will take care of the administrative duties of moving and fighting the Iranians, but they won't be aligned with any of the major powers. The reserve unit is a Tehran militia unit with a 3 combat strength. So this kind of poses a bit of a dilemma for the Soviets as they invade, because the Iranians only have the cavalry corps currently on map in the capital of Tehran. However, At the start of the Iranians' next impulse, they will absolutely be calling out the reserves, which will go face down, and they will have to go in Tehran since it is the Tehran militia. But that's going to more than double the defensive strength of that hex. And the Soviets, thanks to all of this mountainous terrain here, are not going to be able to bring many units to make an attack in this impulse, which they're going to really need to do if they want to avoid having to face a much stronger defense of Tehran. So the Soviets are also still considered to be a neutral major power because they are not at war with any other major power. This is just a minor country that they've declared war on. So that means they're also constrained to only being able to select combined actions for their impulse type. And under a combined, they do get 4 air missions, which isn't bad, and they get 5 land moves sort of in total. So they'll have to think a little bit how they want to use that and see how this initial impulse of invasion is going to go. They do have surprise, which is another aspect in their favor. With the combined, they do get 1 naval move. I think it's 1 naval move. Yes, 1 naval move. They are not going to use that, however, so we can skip through the port attacks, naval air missions, naval movement, naval combat. They're also not going to engage in any strategic bombardment, but that does bring them to ground strikes. And they are going to use a couple of their air missions to fly some ground strikes here into the defenders there in Tehran. They've got 2 bombers, a 3 and a 2. With the surprise impulse, that means each bomber is going to get to roll twice. The first bomber here needs a 3 or less, and the second bomber needs a 2. So we'll roll 2 dice for the first bomber, and then 2 dice for the next bomber. And the first one manages to roll a 6 and an 8. So that's a miss there. We'll see if the 2 bomber has any better luck, and they get closer with a 3, and they actually do manage with a 2. So what that will do is turn the defenders face down there, and then we will rebase the bombers. I think just we'll send them back to Baku here. And after the ground strike, we move on to rail movement, which they would get 1, but I don't know if they're going to bother with a rail move just yet. So that brings us on to land movement. Now I think we're gonna bring this, if I can get it out of the stack here, bring this mechanized corps. It's gonna be 2 for the clear, and then 4, 5, 6 in the mountains. You may be looking at saying, hey, motorized movement cost on the Pacific maps are 8 for mountains for motorized units, but I don't like to use the motorized movement rates. I don't think they're really appropriate at WiF's scale, this size of game. Motorized movement rates, well, they didn't exist for the longest time in WiF, and then they first appeared as an optional rule. I did play them as an optional rule and just didn't really care for them. So what you'll be seeing throughout this particular playthrough is no use of the motorized movement rates. And maybe, you know, someday maybe I'll do a video on kind of the WiF rules that I have some issues with and why, and go into a little more deeper detail on them in kind of a standalone video. But they're also going to bring Zhukov in here. We might as well keep moving these guys up in case something goes very poorly in the upcoming attack. This guy, well, it doesn't even really do us any good to have slow infantry over here with the bad terrain. Is it worth it? Well, it won't hurt. Hold on. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5. So we've hit our 5. So we can't even move this guy here. We'll wait until next impulse. So we've hit our land movement limit for the combined. We've got no air transport, debark, invasions, or paradrops. Does bring us to land combat. We are going to make an attack here from Zhukov's hex. You see we've got 14 attacking 4. It's a defensive 2 doubled for the mountains. However, the attackers will be adding headquarters support, offensive headquarters support in the form of Zhukov. He will add a +1 to the combat, and then they will also bring in the bomber here with 2 tack factors, giving them a total of 16 to 4. That's going to break down to a 4 to 1. The defenders will choose to resolve it on the assault table. Again, trying to at least bloody the attackers as much as possible. It's going to be a 4 to 1, +1 for the face down unit, +1 for Zhukov's offensive support. So 4 to 1 +2. Let's see how well the Soviets can roll. It's not all that great. It's a 4. On the combat table, that's that's actually fine. It's a no loss to the attacker, and it is a 1S result for the defender. So the defenders they'll suffer 1 loss. The cavalry will be destroyed. The attackers suffer no losses. They will occupy the hex. They will all be turned face down, though. Had they rolled just 1 higher, the mechanized corps could have remained face up instead of being face down. But as far as the Soviets are concerned, I think this is mission accomplished. They've managed to grab the capital. They suffered no losses. It could have been a fairly expensive invasion if they had rolled a little more poorly there. And with that, I don't think we have any air rebases. Neither do we have any reorganization that we can do. So that's going to wrap up the Soviet first impulse. We'll move the marker up 2, and then we'll roll for weather, and it's back to the fascists. We're going to stay here in Asia for the start of the fascist second impulse. The weather roll was a 3, which means it's the exact same as the last impulse's weather, no change. We rolled a 1 last time, but we had a +2 to give us a final result of 3. This was a 3. There were no modifiers to it. So it's storm in Arctic, it's rain in North Temperate, fine in both the Med and North Monsoon, and then South Monsoon is rain and South Temperate fine. The Japanese did manage to take Changsha last impulse. That's probably about as far as they're going to get this turn, if I'm honest. But I think they will go ahead, and they don't have much they're going to do, but they are going to shift some units around, maybe looking ahead to next turn. They're going to slide this infantry unit into the mountains. It exceeds the 3 movement factors that the unit has, so we'll be turned face down. And do they want to, you know what? Let's go ahead and bring this 8-3 into Changsha. That's in the North Monsoon, so that's just going to cost 2 to go there, so they can remain face up. And then from here, Nanking, let's go ahead and slide the militia into the mountains there, and then he will be inverted. And I think that's going to do it. A real quick impulse here from the Japanese, which means we can move on to Europe, where we've got the nationalists that still may have something to do, although I don't think so. I think most of their units were turned face down with that big attack last impulse. But Germany may be wanting to do something. So let's go ahead and see what's going on in Europe this impulse. First stop in Europe is going to be in Spain. This will be rather quick, as the bulk of the nationalists are face down here after the attack. They do have a bit of a situation, you could call it, I guess, developing here further west around Malaga. The Republicans have moved this infantry corps out of Malaga. There is a resource here that is basically ungarrisoned. If they can capture this resource, that's going to give them 3 production points, which are 3 build points, which will enable them to start building at least some infantry reinforcements. So the nationalists want to prevent the Republicans from grabbing this resource, but they don't really have a lot to do that with. They've got this garrison unit here in Sevilla, but if they move up here, that'll open up Sevilla, and they can move in and capture Sevilla, which will again provide them just as many build points as capturing this resource here, and so that's kind of problematic. So the garrison here is pretty much locked in place, I think. Again, the Italians are more than happy to give the nationalists all of the activities limits they have, which in this case is 3 with the combined. So they are going to move this Sevilla militia over. Excuse me. What that's going to do is it will at least project the zone of control here, as does the garrison here. So if the Republicans make a lunge for this, they will have to stop in either of those hexes. And then further north here, they'll move this garrison unit over. So now it's basically a race to see who can get to this unit here. And that's really all we have going on down in Spain, this impulse at least. Like I said, the Italians really aren't doing anything just yet. They've really got to be thinking about whether or not they want to jump into the war against France and the Commonwealth right now. Germany would certainly love to see that, as any distractions outside of the front in northeastern France is going to help them. But the Italians really, I don't think, really are not yet ready to do so. So let's go ahead and take a look and see if Germany is going to do anything. Remember, it's going to be rain up there again. It's only a -1 combat shift, but it does double all movement. And certainly the Germans want to continue pressing forward with each impulse and not give more opportunities to the Allies or to the Democrats to kind of shore up their defensive line. So let's take a look and see what, if anything, is going to happen up there this impulse. Well, looking at the possibilities here in France on the main front, there's really not much for the Germans. A lot of the units down south here are face down from the last attack. We've got the stack here, the garrisons here. One of the units in this hex is face down. I think that's the headquarters that provided support. So it really doesn't look like there's much of an opportunity for the Germans to make anything approaching a good odds attack in France. And with that in mind, particularly with the -1 penalty for the rain. So with that in mind, the Germans actually are going to turn and do a naval impulse. They will pay for the oil cost for the full impulse, which is only 6/10. And for the Soviets, they actually paid per unit. Last time it was a total of 3 oil-dependent units that moved, so that would cost them 2/10, which they paid. So for the Germans, the naval will start off with port attacks, which we don't have any. No naval air missions, but we do have some naval movement. They're going to sortie the Nord fleet here, put them into the Baltic, and they're also going to send their submarines out into the North Sea here. Now, this will be a little interesting because we've not yet seen any submarine action, I don't think, in this playthrough. And the submarine rules that I use are house rules, although they are house rules that are really just a very slight modification of the old official WiF rules. The way submarines were handled, basically, if you're familiar with the older editions, 5th edition and earlier, the way I handle the subs in this game should be very familiar to you. And I think, and the reason for that, in short, I will, this is a video that I will do, because I do want to go into this in some detail. It wouldn't really be appropriate here in the playthrough, but the sub rules changed dramatically with the introduction of Ships in Flames, which was a sort of an add-on or expansion to the 5th edition, and they've remained that way in the final edition and now here into the collector's edition. So we've got some real issues. I think this was one of the worst design decisions that Harry has made in the history of WiF. There's one more that I think, at least one more that I think is even more egregious than this one. So we'll see when we get to combat involving subs exactly how that's going to work. But for now, that is going to complete the German naval movement, at least, and then we'll move on to naval combat. We do have a search roll to make here in the Baltic, and so we'll go ahead and roll that real quick. The Germans will turn down, face down one of their units to, actually we moved in, so I don't think we need to do that. I'll double check that here off camera. But here are the search roles, the red die being the Axis die and the green die the Democrat die. And it's not really going to matter what the Democrats roll. They rolled a 4. 6 to 4, the 6. They're in the 4 box, so they both search rolls failed. There will be no combat in the Baltic. This impulse, that will also wrap up the rather brief German impulse. There's no chance of the turn ending, so we'll advance the box or the marker 2 boxes on the impulse track and bring it over to the Democrats. The turn ending die roll number is a 0 currently with the once we get into the Democrats. So if all of the Democrats pass, they would have to roll a 2 or less to end the turn. I don't know that they necessarily want to do that or that's going to help them out much. I think the French at least have some things they want to do here in France to kind of bolster the line and maybe shuffle some stuff around. So I don't think the French will be passing, and looks like the Commonwealth does have at least 1 unit they want to probably land in France's turn. So let's go ahead and see what the Democrats are going to do. Both the Commonwealth and France decided to do land impulses. The French were able to move an infantry corps into the forest hex here to bring up the strength of this particular hex. The Commonwealth landed Wavell here at Calais. You can see they've got a kind of a 2 deep line on this hex, and down here they've only got a single hex here. This is open except for the Spitfires. There's also lacking any ground units here, so they could do with another 2 to 3 land units to really get that double deep line all up and down the front from Switzerland to the North Sea. But they are pretty much out of units to do that right now, so it's going to take another couple turns worth of reinforcements, maybe even more than that, given the slow speed at which they're actually able to build anybody right now. So the Germans may have the upcoming spring, possibly summer, to try to break out and punch a hole and get to Paris. Down in Spain, the Republicans are really just not going to do much. You can see we talked about getting to the resource here, and while the infantry corps certainly could move here, it would then be out of supply, unable to trace to anything, which means the next time it moved, it would be turned face down. So even though it could probably beat the garrison corps here to the resource, it'll end up on the resource face down. It would actually be back in supply though, so it wouldn't have its strength reduced to 1, which for the mountains would be a 2. So that is actually something to consider. And since the French did a land impulse, the Republicans have as many land moves as they want to use. Do we want to do that? You know what? I think it's at this point, it's worth a shot. If they don't do it, then they are certainly just condemning themselves to, again, this slow grinding defeat. So why not take a shot and see if maybe they can get to the point where they can at least start rebuilding some infantry units and giving them some sort of hope to turn the tide here. And with that, we are going to advance the marker another 2 boxes on the impulse track. Again, we would need a 0 to end the turn. So we're going over to the communists now. This is the first chance that the turn will have to end, but it will need a 1 since the communists will not be passing. And looks like pretty much everything the communists are going to do is going to be over there in Iran around the Caspian. So let's jump over there real quick and we'll see what they decide to do. With the Soviets in control of the capital Tehran here, there are no printed factory hexes in Iran, which means the Soviets currently meet the requirements in order to conquer Iran. So there's really no need for any further combat or any forces in the region here, which means they're going to start pulling back. And again, with the combined, they've got 5 moves, so they'll spend 3 of them to move these guys here. Zhukov and the mechanized are face down, so they're not going anywhere this turn. Before we get to land move, I really should do the rail move, and we'll start by railing the headquarters of Timoshenko back, I think, to the European maps. We'll send him to Kiev, actually. So we've got 3 land moves there, and now we'll slide this infantry army into Baku. That's the 4th movement there, and I think that, and we'll move an infantry army over there out of Odessa just to make room for some of the units that we anticipate railing out of this theater back over to European Russia. And that's going to do it. So let's go ahead and see if they manage to end the turn on a 1. They roll a 4, which means the turn will continue. Might as well roll the weather while we're at it. The weather roll, wow. The weather roll is a 1 with no modifiers. That is going to be rain in the Arctic and fine everywhere else. So the weather has been exceptionally good this turn so far, which I guess is pretty typical for the way things have been going this game. We've had, I think, some really good weather in what should be short bad weather turns. That's going to move the marker up only 1 box over the next 3 impulses. So there's a pretty good chance that everyone is going to get at least 1 more impulse in, if not 2. That brings us back to the fascists with the good weather essentially everywhere because there's no combat operations going on in the Arctic. I'll have to think a bit and see what we want to do with them. We're going to skip right to the main event. We're going to do Germany's impulse first here in Europe. Now, this freakishly good weather is really important for the Germans. They are not going to suffer any odd shift penalties with any attacks they make this turn, but more importantly, the Luftwaffe's tactical factors will not be halved, so they will be able to bring the full force of their air support into any attacks they make. And not wanting to let this opportunity slip by, they are going to select a land type of impulse. They will spend the 10/10ths oil to fully fuel everything. That means we don't have to worry about any naval activities like port attacks or naval movement or naval combat. There's no strategic bombardment, so we go right to ground strike missions. As when Germany does a land impulse, the activity limits give them 4 air missions, so they've got a maximum of 4 bombers they can use for ground strikes, and they are going to take maximum advantage of that by bringing 1, 2, let's see, where did they go? There they are. Bring the other Stukas here, and we'll bring our 110s in there. So we've got 2 bombers striking this hex and 2 bombers striking this hex. This is a forest hex, so the tactical factors will be halved and then rounded up. And the Germans are going to send this fighter as an escort because it doesn't really have the range to intercept should the Allied air forces come up to intercept, which I think they are sure to do. At this point, it is up to the Commonwealth and France if they're going to intercept any of these or either of these missions, and they are definitely going to do that. This would seem to be the logical target hex for the Germans. There's a headquarters and an artillery unit in this hex, which is why the Germans are ground striking that hex in addition to the hex here. And the Allies have to decide whether they're going to split their interceptors across both of them or concentrate everything in the hopes of turning back the more important of the two ground strikes. And I think the Germans, they've got a 3 tactical 110 here and a 5 tactical Stuka. Having those for the woods is going to bring it to a 2.5, which rounds up to 3, and a 1.5, which rounds to 2. I think the Allies are comfortable taking their chances, if you will, with those ground strikes, and so they're going to pour everything into what they think is the actual target hex. And because of the treaty level that that exists between the Commonwealth and France, they can commit their fighters to. Let's see, do we want to send the Belgians in as well? They do have 2 remaining fighters. The Potez 63 here, 631, is a fairly decent bomber actually for this period of time, and maybe more useful in the fighter bomber role than as a fighter. So I think they may hold this one back for sure, but do they want to commit the Belgian CR-42B? This is probably not the last air activity that's going to be going on. This impulse, for instance, we're presuming the Germans are going to follow up with some sort of land attack, and it might be nice to have some fighters to screen the Allied bombers that would fly in to assist the defenders. So I think maybe we do leave these fighters out, and then we'll see what the Germans decide to do as far as what they are going to intercept the interceptors with. From the German side, this makes things a little bit easier because they don't have to split their own fighters. They're going to send their 2 best fighters. Matter of fact, they're going to send pretty much everybody, I think, that can reach. We know that the Allies have committed how much? That's a 4, a 4, a 5. Do they have? I thought the Allies had somebody else here. Oh, I think he's under here actually. Yep, there we go. They're going to commit those 4 aircraft to intercept the German bombers, which means the maximum the Allies could field would be a 5.4, 0.8, a 6.2. So the Germans, they could get a 6.9, so that's a 7.4 to 6.2 is like a 1.2. One of the problems that the Allies have created for the Germans is the fact that they do have some fighters and they have some bombers, and the Germans don't want to give the Allies a free pass with their defensive ground support in the upcoming attack. So they probably will hold this guy back, and we will go with these 4 fighters against or 5 fighters against the Commonwealth and Commonwealth and France. So let's go ahead and pull all the aircraft off. This will be, I think, by far the biggest air battle that we have had to date. So I'll find some room for this, and we'll see how this shakes out in the air over Belgium here. All right, we've grabbed some convenient space on the edge of the board here to lay out the fighter and bomber streams. The front fighters for each side are the fighters that are closest to the enemy. Same for the bombers here. So we have the front bomber, front fighter, and front fighter. The Germans have air-to-air strength of 6. That's 0.6. That's 7.1, 7.4, 7.7. The Allies have a 5.4, 0.8, 6.2. So 7.7 minus 6.2 yields a difference of 1.5, which will round up to 2. So the Germans will be rolling on the +2 column. The Allies will be rolling on the -2 column. And since the Allies are the non-phasing players, they will roll first. Let's see what their first shot looks like here. It's pretty good, but I don't know if it's good enough. That's a 7. 7 on the -2 is a defender aborts front fighter or front bomber. Well, for the Germans, it's all about getting those bombers through, so they are unfortunately going to abort their front fighter. Let's see if they can return the favor here on the +2 column. And they do that and then some. It is a 2 at the +2. That is attacker destroys the defender's front fighter or front bomber. However, it's a green box, which means the pilots do survive. So the Spitfires will go down in flames. And at the end of the first round of combat, we have destroyed Spitfire and an aborted 109. Now, neither side is going to abort, which means we're going to have to recalculate the air-to-air totals. We've got 6, 6.5, 6.8, 7.1. This is going to be a 4.8. So 7.1, 4.8, doing the math, I believe that's 2.3, which is going to round down to 2. So we're staying on the same column for round 2 here. We'll have the Allies make their roll, and it's not a good one. It is a 10. You want to avoid the middle of the table here. So on a -2, that's a DC. That's defender clears through any one defending bomber. Now, in most cases, or when you are aborting or destroying something, it's always the front fighter or bomber. But when the defender gets to clear a bomber through, they get to choose any of the bombers in the stream. So they will choose the long-range Stukas here, since both of them are 4s. So they get one of their bombers through. And now it's time for the Germans to shoot back on the +2. And they, oddly enough, roll the exact same thing that the Democrats did with a 10, and that is going to be an attacker clears through any one defending bomber. So there are no Allied bombers involved in the battle, which makes this a no effect. Now we go on to round 3. And the Germans, as the attacker, make the first decision. They, of course, are going to stay in the air and fight. They have the advantage, and they want to make sure they get this next bomber through. This is a little bit harder choice for the Allies. They are fighting at a disadvantage, but they feel reasonably confident that they can. They've got a good enough shot to at least abort the remaining Stuka, so they're going to risk it and stay in the air for a 3rd round. And here's their shot. It's a pretty good one, I think. 15. 15 at -2 again is a DA. So the defenders will abort their front fighter or front bomber. The Germans still have an advantage here, so they're going to choose to abort their front fighter again, in hopes that this round they can again get rid of another defending fighter here. So again on the +2 column, and that's not going to do it. It is a 10. So no effect, just like last time. Now we're at the beginning of round 4. Round 4, we have the Germans would be looking at having a 5.6 to a 4.8. That's a 0.8. That moves it to the +1, -1 column. They still have a bit of an advantage. It's not as big as it was before, but they're gonna risk it. They're gonna stay. The Allies, they've come this far. The fight is starting to lean their way, so they're going to stick with it here as well. So here comes the Allies' round 4 shot, and it is another good one. It's a 16 on the -1. That is AA. That is the attacker aborts defender's front fighter or front bomber. Since the Allies now get the choice, they will choose to abort the remaining bomber. Let's see what the German escorts do in return here on the +1 column. They roll a little better than they have been, but I don't know if it's a great roll, actually. It's probably going to be fairly irrelevant. It's a defender aborts front fighter, front bomber, so the Hurricanes will be aborted. And we come now to the end of the round. Going into round 5, the Germans have to decide whether they're going to stick around or whether they're going to abort. The combat would be a 5.6 to a 4.4. It'd still be a +1, -1. There's not much of a point in sticking around as far as the primary mission of getting the bombers through for the ground strikes. At this point, the Germans would be sticking around just to try to shoot down some French fighters. And you know what? They'll go ahead and they'll decide to stay, which puts it back now onto the French to decide if they're going to stick around. They're looking at a 5.6 to a 4.4. Again, it's a 1.2 differential. It's going to round down to 1, so +1, -1. Same columns that they just rolled on, but for the Allies, there doesn't appear to be as big an upside to sticking around. I think preserving their fighters is more important than fighting, especially fighting at a disadvantage here. So the French will choose to abort here before the start of the next round, which means the German fighters that remain in the air will also abort. And I would consider that combat to be a bit of an Allied victory, considering they stopped one of the bombers going through and they were at a +2, -2 disadvantage. So with the air resolve, it did however cost them their best fighter on the continent right now in the Spitfires. The pilots did survive, so it's not a big build point cost, only a loss of 2 build points, but they did lose their best fighter, which could come back to hurt them here over the next turn before they're able to replace them. So let's rebase all of these aircraft, and then we will resolve the ground strike from the one Stuka that made it through. All right, back on the map, you can see both sides have rebased the aircraft. The Allies rebased their surviving fighters. They kind of split them, with one going to the south here, the other two staying a little bit closer to the front and in the north, whereas the Germans rebased their aircraft in this general area here. So let's go ahead and resolve the actual ground strikes now. We'll start with the Hex that we just had the big air battle over, and that's the one Stuka here, who's a 4. He's got 2 targets, the headquarters and the Paris militia. There are no modifiers, so basically a 4 or less to flip the units. And I'll just roll these at the same time. The red die will be the headquarters, the green die will be the militia unit. Look for a 4 or less for the Germans, and they get a red 4 and a green 2. So the single bomber proved to be more than enough. We'll rebase him back here, and that will in fact flip both of the units face down. So despite a lackluster performance by the German fighters, the bombers were able to carry out their mission. Now, moving down to the other hex here, we have a 5, which we said is going to be halved to 2.5, rounding up to 3, and a 3, which becomes a 1.5, rounded up to 2. We have a total of 3 units in the hex: the artillery, the HQ, and the infantry. So what we'll do is, again, I'll roll the 2 dice. We'll roll the red die will be the 5 strength Stuka. The green die will be the 110s. So if we get a 3 on the red die and a 2 on the green die, that will be a successful ground strike, and we'll roll just top to bottom here. So we'll start off with the attack on the, well, no, technically, if we do that, or I tell you what, let's roll the 3 first. The 3 will go top to bottom. So the red die will be the artillery die, the green die will be the headquarters, and we get a 10 and a 9, so that misses both of them. And then for the infantry corps on the bottom, it is a 4, so the Stukas miss. And now for the 110s, again, we'll do the same thing. Red die is the artillery, green die the headquarters, and the red die again for the infantry. We're looking for a 2 this time, and we get a green 10 and a red 4. So misses there, and then one more chance for the infantry corps, and it is another 4. Lots of 4s on this red die tonight. So the ground strikes in the adjacent forest hex were a failure. We need to rebase these aircraft as well, and I think we'll put him there. And I think we're going to, that's okay, we 1, 2, 3. I will put him 1, 2, 3 back here in Köln. So ground strikes are now wrapped up, fully successful in one hex and total failure in the adjacent hex. That will have some impact on the upcoming battle. I think, though, the Germans are generally satisfied. They're very happy about getting both of the units in the hex there. That will be ultimately the object of the attack. But before we get to that, we've got a few more things to do, like land movement, air transport. There won't be any debarking of land units, no invasions or paradrops. So let me go ahead and do the land movement. This will be primarily just some shuffling around of the German units to kind of maximize their attack chances here. And it's going to require me digging through a number of stacks, as you see in here, which can be tricky. So rather than have you watch me fumble through all that stuff, I'll go ahead and take care of that off camera once the German land movement is complete and we are ready to resolve the actual combat, and we'll pick back up. All right, the Germans have moved their units into position for the attack. So that's going to bring us right to the land combat step, and the Germans are going to be attacking the headquarters here from these 3 adjacent hexes. Now, in these 2 hexes are going to be coming across a river there, so the strength of the units in those 2 hexes is going to be halved. They have a 9-strength infantry corps and a 3-strength artillery unit for a total of 12 in the southernmost hex. They have von Rundstedt, I believe it is, the 7-strength headquarters unit here, the armor HQ, and a 7-strength panzer corps underneath for a total of 14. So 12 and 14 halved becomes 13, and in this hex here, which is not crossing a river, we have infantry division of 2, a motorized corps of 8, and a mechanized corps of 8 for a total of 18. 18 plus 13 from the other 2 hexes gives us 31. The defenders have a 6-strength headquarters and a 5-strength militia for a total of 11. So the initial odds are 31 to 11, breaks down to be a 2 to 1. The next question is any HQ support. Von Rundstedt will provide HQ support. He is a 4. For the French, they do have Georges here, who is adjacent. He is a 3 as well. So were they to commit him, they would have to turn him face down, which would not be good. But you would subtract his 3 from von Rundstedt's 4. That would leave a net 1. Divided by 4 is 0.25. And that would round down to 0. So it would eliminate a +1 for the Germans. And since the Allies do seem to be throwing everything they have into this combat to try to stop it, they will go ahead and commit their HQ, and as will the Germans. So the HQ support washes out. No additions for that, no modifiers. The French have now for ground support. The Germans do have, I think this might be the only bomber they've got face up. And if that's the case, I think they will send him in here. The 31, if he gets through, that would make it 34 to 11, at least for the moment, which would be enough to bump it up to a 3 to 1. So they will go ahead and send their bomber in. On the Allied side, I think only the French have any bombers, but they will, in fact, send in the Amiot 143 and their fighter bombers. If all 5 of them get through, that's going to raise the defense to a 16, which will, assuming the Germans get through and making the German support gets through, making it a 34 to 16. That's a 2 to 1, but it will drop it from a 3 to 1. And who knows, if the Germans get turned back and they attack 31 to 16, that is less than a 2 to 1. That would be a 3 to 2 attack. But they're not going to stop there. They're also going to throw in these 75s. They will provide 2 then there's nothing the Germans can do about that. So we know it's going to be a 31-13 at this point, potentially as good as a 34-13, which will be enough to deny the 3-1 to the Germans. Could be as bad as a 31-18, which is going to be a 3-2. So the Allies also will be intercepting / escorting with their biplanes, and then of course that will bring in the Heinkel 112s. So we've got yet another air battle here. This one's a little bit smaller. There's more bombers involved, but fewer fighters. So again, we'll pull up a convenient corner of the map and resolve the air battle. Here we see both sides having set up their fighter and bomber streams. Again, the front fighter and front bomber is the one that is closest to the enemy, so we've got just a single fighter on each side. The air-to-air value, it's going to be 4-3, so it's going to be a +1 for the Germans, a -1 for the French and Belgians. And as far as the bomber stream goes, the Amiot are the front bomber here, and the Do-17s are the only bomber for the Germans. Now, once again, the French and Belgians are the non-phasing side, so they will roll first on the -1 column, and they would love to get rid of that German fighter. A 4 is probably going to do it. No, it's a good roll. It is a DX. It defender destroys front fighter or front bomber. Now the Germans, this is a tough choice for them. If they destroy the bomber's more expensive. They don't have a ton of bombers. But if they destroy their front fighter, then if they don't abort or shoot down one of the French bombers, both of the French bombers will get through, and they will leave their bomber here to the tender mercies of the Allied fighters. But it is a green box, which means the pilots are going to survive no matter what. I think they are going to go ahead and eliminate or destroy their own front fighter and risk it all on this one roll here. Let's see what they do. They do not want to roll a 10 like they did a couple of rounds last combat. They roll much better. They roll 17. 17 on a +1 is going to be a DX. So it is a yellow box, which means the pilot survives if shot down over friendly territory, which is the case here for the French and Belgians. Unfortunately, they just missed the attacker destroys front fighter, front bomber. So the choice is up to the French, and if they destroy the Amiot, then that will leave just the fighter bombers to get through. If they destroy their Belgian fighter, then that means that everybody's bombers will get through. If they destroy the Amiot, it means their fighter bombers will get through, and they'll have a chance to potentially shoot down the German bombers or abort them. And thinking back to it, if they destroyed the Belgian fighter, that would be it would end up being a 34-18, so a 3-2. If they destroy this one and they knock him out, it's going to be a 31 to at most now a 16, which is still a 3-2, just barely. Tough call here, but I think given the general lack of bombers that the Allies have, they will go ahead and keep the bomber, and they will destroy the Belgian fighter here. Like I said, they do at least get to keep the pilot, so we'll mark that over on the chart. And with no fighters remaining at the end of round 1, beginning of round 2, all of the bombers on both sides are cleared through. So we'll head back to the map here and resolve the actual combat, having destroyed one fighter apiece. So again, considering they were slightly disadvantaged, I think the Allies got the slight edge again in the air. With all of the aircraft involved in the ground support mission returned to base, the only remaining thing to do is to roll the die to actually resolve the combat. And we have a total of 34 factors, including ground support, attacking a defensive strength of 18, again, including the artillery support and the French ground support. That's going to reduce down to a 3-2. It'll be +2 for the 2 face-down units in the defender's hex. So a 3-2+2, and it probably goes without saying that this is potentially the most decisive combat we have seen in the entire game so far. Thanks to the +2, the Germans have eliminated the possibility of losing 2 units, but that still does leave them a 20% chance of accomplishing nothing more than killing an armor or mechanized unit in this attack. They do have a 10% chance of an exchange, although the French would come out way ahead on that, since they have a militia unit in the hex that they would certainly destroy rather than the HQ, versus losing an expensive and hard to replace mech or armor unit on the German side. And then finally, the Germans have a 10% chance of inflicting 1 loss on the French, which again would be that militia. So not a very big hit to the Allies. So that's a 50% chance of what I would consider failure, leaving them a 50% chance of success. And what am I defining as success? That would be taking the hex. Now, there are varying levels of success, but at a bare minimum, the Germans could trade a mechanized unit or an armored unit to capture the hex. That would be an expensive, a very expensive price to pay for the hex, but it would get them a little bit closer to their ultimate goal. They've got another 10% chance of taking the hex by retreating the defenders, which would just push them 1 hex to the west for no loss. And again, in all of these circumstances, that's 70% of the possible outcomes. All of the defenders are going to be turned face down. Now, or 60% of the chances. Now, they've got 40% to keep some of their guys face up. That's not as important, I think, right now, given the turn. It's January, February. We're deep into January, February. Yes, the weather has been unseasonably good, but there is a chance at the end of this impulse that on a 2 or less, the entire turn ends, and that's only going to increase moving forward. So I think we probably have this set of impulses, maybe one more full set of impulses left in the turn. Now, for the Germans to really sort of achieve any kind of breakthrough, literally a B result, they've got to roll an 8, 9, or 10. So they have a 30% chance, and that would be huge, because not only would they take this hex, but they would also be able to advance into this hex, and they would, for the first time, have something very close to an actual breakthrough of the Western democracy's defense line here. So, with all of that out of the way here, we are looking for, as far as Germany is concerned, something really good. The Allies could probably live with just about any result. If they lose the hex, it'll be bad, but again, they're just trying to slow the Germans down at this point. They've got some spring weather coming up, so it wouldn't be the end of the world. Let's see what happens. Excuse me. Well, that was highly unexpected. Probably the best attack roll by any of the fascist powers so far this game. A 9, that's +2, converts to an 11. That is going to be an asterisk result, so no loss for the Germans. Every one of the attackers will remain face up, except for the headquarters, which will be turned face down because of providing support. They will inflict 1 loss on the French, and they get a B result, a breakthrough result. So this is exactly what the Germans were hoping for. And like I said, this is going to be pretty huge. Now, the headquarters will come off because they can retreat. They will go on the production circle to arrive as a reinforcement next turn, and the Paris militia will be destroyed. However, with a 1-turn build time, I suspect we'll see them appearing in Paris at the beginning of next turn anyway. Now, however, the Germans are able to seize the resource and the hex to the west of it. We'll figure out exactly who wants to go where. I think what we're going to do is have the mechanized and motorized units break through. We'll bring the armored corps, and I'll flip Rundstedt while I've got him here. Put the aircraft back here in Aachen, and we'll bring the artillery in as well. And I think we're going to leave the division here just to prevent any sort of silliness on the part of the Belgians here coming out from Brussels. There are a lot of face down and vulnerable German aircraft there across the border. Not that the Belgians would necessarily get a chance to overrun them, but we'd rather not take the chance. A single division isn't terribly strong, but there's a river here which will help, and of course the artillery here could provide some ground support if necessary. But this is just more of a general precaution, leaving the division behind. We'd prefer to have it further to the front, but given how everything worked out so far this turn, I mean, we'll take it. So that's going to wrap up a very consequential German impulse here in January, February. As you can see, there are literally no defenders between the leading German panzers and Paris. We'll have to see how the Democrats react, if they get a chance to react, because again, once I'm finished with the Italians and the Spanish nationalists, we're going to have to roll to see if we end the turn. So over to Spain. There's not a lot going on here in Spain with the bulk of the nationalist forces face down. However, there is an issue here with the Republicans taking a lunge at the resource hex here. There's really no way the nationalists are going to be able to beat them to the punch, as it were. And so what they might do is just kind of keep pressing forward on the off chance that the turn ends. There's only a 20% chance of that, and they can beat the Republican Infantry Corps here to the hex. I don't think that's going to happen. The civilian militia would like to slide in here, but by doing so, they would open up an alternative path to the resource hex here for these guys. So they may just have to stay where they are for the moment. Now, this unit currently is out of supply. If they move, they will be turned face down. But if they move into this hex, it won't matter, because these are supply sources for the Republicans. I'm pretty sure. I will double check. That's been a while since I've looked at the Civil War rules for that, but I'm pretty sure they would be in supply here. Other than that, there's really not much going on here, and I think then we can go ahead and make the roll to end the turn. This would be a bit of a problem for the Democrats if the turn ends here. So a 2 or less. Well, that was closer than they were probably hoping it would be. A 3 does mean that the turn continues, and so we will be moving on. The box, or the marker only advances a single box, and we'll now have the Democrats give them an opportunity to respond to the big German attack in southern Belgium. Well, France and the Commonwealth find themselves facing a rather serious issue here. The Germans have managed to kind of break through the line that they had almost succeeded in forming. They had just been able to get some unit here that would have prevented that breakthrough, and it would have meant more grinding attacks by the Germans. But now they're kind of poised on the edge of a breakout, so the top priority is to seal the breach here. They don't have a lot to do that with. Both of the major powers are going to be doing land impulses, though, because they'll be moving some units around, and I believe the UK is going to pay for their oil-dependent units on a unit-by-unit basis, rather than paying to fuel an entire land impulse. So they don't think they've got that many, but they are going to be moving more than one. So with 2 land impulses, we don't have any naval activity. The air forces for both countries are essentially spent, which brings us right up to rail movement, of which we have none, and it's on to land movement. What the French, they've got a couple of decent units here, which they'd like to try and extract from, or at least put them into a little more useful position, and in exchange, they will move those units up. We'll bring the Moroccans up there to try to close the gap, at least the southern half of the gap. We'll shift the artillery up, and then we can bring the Bordeaux militia here, and they may use the AT guns there as well. Now on the Commonwealth side, they're going to bring 1, 2, 3. They'll bring Wavell in here, and we have a 7 and a 6-2 militia. We'll go ahead and bring the 7-3 here, giving them a pretty decent defense strength of 12 for that hex. They will also shift Gort, if I can get him. There we go. Gort and the 25 pounders here out of Amsterdam. It's going to leave 5-4. They'll move the Brussels militia in, and we will go ahead and put these guys back here. And so the Allied lines certainly stretched, but not broken, at least not at the moment. And they have a fairly credible defense strength of 12 here, potentially 14 with the artillery here. And in the French hex, it's going to be 5 for the mountain troops plus 2, which is a 7 for the AT guns. But if the Germans use any armor or mechanized, which is very likely, that's actually going to be doubled to a 4. So they've got a 12, maybe 14 here, and an 8 here, again, which can only be attacked from one hex. So it looks like the crisis, actually, this hex could be an 8 plus 3 is 11. So you're looking like a 14 and an 11. At the moment, the crisis seems to have passed, but they are getting stretched pretty thin, and you can see there's no second line of defense here, even up here behind Brussels and Antwerp, or I'm sorry, here's Brussels here, behind the BEF here. They're a little bit vulnerable. It remains to be seen. It's going to be kind of a race to see whether the Germans can extend or widen their breach here to get some decent attacks on the Allies before the Allies can rebuild and again start filling in here. But things are not looking good here for the Ardennes. The Allies had contemplated a counterattack, if you will, maybe on this hex or this hex, but the fact that they turned their artillery face down and the headquarters in their face down, they can only attack with a single unit out of this hex. So it would be pretty much just a single hex attack on what are two strong hexes, and the chances of something going very badly were far exceeded any potential gain of cutting off the spearhead here. Even if they had, it may have been relatively temporary, and the risk they could have done to their position, I think the risk of the damage they could have done to their own position would just outweigh that. So they kind of quickly dismissed any thoughts of counterattacking here. And we now move on to the Chinese, and matter of fact, I think we'll just keep rolling here, and as we come across over to China, the only thing really for the Chinese here, they're just moving this Kunming. Well, do they want to move them out of the city? Yeah, they might as well. They're going to try and get them a little closer to the front. They will turn face down because of the mountain costs there. That's really that's going to be it for the nationalists. And with that, we will roll to see if the Allies end the turn. Again, it's a 2 or less, and I don't think the Soviets are terribly happy about that, but it is a 2, so the turn has ended. That's going to throw us into the end of turn stage. We've got the partisan roll to make. The U.S. entry, that's now largely handled in the days of decision portion of the turn at the beginning of the game. And we will have, I think, a convoy attack phase. This is something we haven't seen yet this game, and for those of you that have been playing WiF long enough, which would be all the way back to 5th edition, you'll probably recognize what's about to happen here. So I'll make the partisan roll. If there's anything of interest there, I will show that. Otherwise, we'll probably go right to the convoy attack, as we have one convoy attack up in the Baltic Sea. Well, I've made the partisan roll for the turn, and the Netherlands, Korea, and China were the affected countries. I made the rules for the Netherlands and Korea. Both of those countries just missed getting a partisan unit. However, the China rule did result in one partisan appearing, and we're in a situation here where the front lines have now moved far enough westward that there's at least one hex back here that would be legal for a partisan unit to be placed, and so therefore we have our first partisan of the game on map here on the eastern China coast. It's just a 1-4 partisan, as you can see. Most of the partisans, especially the early partisans, are pretty weak. There's some 0 strength units in there. There'll be more of a distraction or an annoyance for the Japanese, but it is something for them to deal with. Might give the Chinese here a little bit of a break, as the Japanese have to divert at least some resources to dealing with this partisan menace here. Now that would normally take us to the U.S. entry, return to base, and so on in the end of turn stage. However, if you recall, early on in this series I said that I'd be using some house rules. Because this is not a tutorial type of situation, I wanted to bring in a few house rules that I've used with groups over the years. Just for one, I prefer to play the game that way, and also maybe give some of you out there a chance to take a look at them, maybe give you some ideas for what you can do in your own WiF games. And the house rules, most of the house rules that I'm using here concern how convoy points are handled and submarines. Now, and what I've done is we've inserted a convoy pipeline placement segment near the front of the WiF portion of the turn, which really is nothing more than a callback to the sequence of play and how things were handled in 5th edition prior to the appearance of ships in flames. And what we are doing also is in the end of turn stage, after the partisans phase, we will be inserting a convoy attack phase. Now, in Collector's Edition, under the rules as written, convoys and convoy points are attacked during the action stage just as part of the ongoing turn, but it wasn't always that way in World in Flames. And I guess the Cliff Notes version is, what I'm doing is dialing back the rules back to 5th edition prior to the introduction of the final edition and Ships in Flames for 5th edition. And I don't want to get into the details of everything in this particular video right here, right now. So I'll give you a brief summary, just enough for you to be able to follow what's happening, because we do have our first convoy attack of the game, and it's going to be in the Baltic here. What I think I will do is I'm going to do a separate video that is dedicated pretty much to the submarine rules, the convoy points, that sort of thing. Give you a little bit of a history of how things were, when things changed, why I don't think it was a good idea. The new current rules really are not as good as the previous rules. But so, and I may do that actually when I finish getting this video together, get this uploaded. It's a pretty good time, because I anticipate having more and more convoy attacks and submarine action as we move forward, as the war expands in the game. So this might be a good chance to put that video together, and that'll give those of you who are unfamiliar with the 5th edition rules and how they work, it'll give you an idea or give you a good idea of what's going on, what's happening, why it's happening, and so forth. So for now, though, we are going to jump over to the Baltic and resolve the convoy attack. And like I said, I'll give you just kind of a bare bones breakdown of what I'm doing, and we'll save the whys and wherefores for the other video. Here in the Baltic, you can see we have a couple of convoy points that are from the Commonwealth. They were sailed into the Baltic Sea when some economic agreements were signed with Poland to transport Polish resources to factories in the United Kingdom. And they have been cut off once war broke out between the United Kingdom and Germany. They basically became trapped here in the Baltic Sea. And this turn, the Germans have sallied their Nordfleet into the Baltic, and that consists of the aircraft carrier Graf Zeppelin, battleship Tirpitz, Scharnhorst, and Gneisenau, along with the cruisers Köln and Emden. So we have a total of 6 surface raiders who will be attacking these 2 convoy points. And how we're going to resolve that, or how that's going to work, we're going to need some charts for that, and I will go ahead and give you a brief summary of how the process is going to work here, and we'll go ahead and make the roll and see what, if any, damage is done to the Commonwealth convoy points. Now, the current rules as written for handling submarines and convoy points really are less than satisfactory. And like I said, I'll get into the whys of that and the details of it in a separate dedicated video on that. But being unhappy with the way those rules work, rather than reinvent the wheel, which my group actually tried to do for a number of years, we thought it's actually just, why not go back to what was working, and what was working pretty well, with some slight modifications. And so that's basically what we're going to be doing in this game. Is we're using the 5th edition rules for handling this, modified very slightly. And in order to do that, we need a copy of the 5th edition charts, which you see right here in front of you. The portion of these charts that we're going to be using are the convoy attack table and the subs versus ships and ships versus subs tables. Now, for what we're doing now in the convoy attack phase, we're going to be dealing with this chart here. And so I will get into how these charts work in the upcoming dedicated video on that. And I'm just going to give you a kind of a very brief rundown of how this chart is going to work here in this game. Now, what you're seeing here is you've got surface raiders, you've got a column for surface raiders and for submarines. And you're going to total up the sub attack values and the number of surface raiders to find out which row you're going to be cross-referencing the number of escorts that are present in the sea zone with the convoy points that are being attacked. Now, in this case, in the Baltic, we have 6 surface ships, so 6 raiders will put us on this 4 to 6 row, and there are no Commonwealth escorts in the sea zone, so we cross-reference that with 0, which brings us down here to the bottom portion of the chart. This is the resolution portion, and we're going to be on this second column in from the left. You can see results on the die roll run from -2 to 9, and that's because 5th edition was a D6, a 6-sided die game, rather than the D10 or 10-sided dice that we've used since Final Edition came out in 1996. We also, in the earlier editions, only had C boxes that went from 0 to 3 rather than 0 to 4. So rather than overcomplicate things, we're just going to use a 6-sided die, and we're going to treat the ships or submarines and escorts that are in the 4 box as being in the 3 box. So 3 and 4 is the same. The reason we're doing that is that the C box that the submarines or the raiders are in is a modifier that is a positive modifier to the die roll, and you will subtract from the die roll as a negative modifier the C box that the escorts are in. And if you've got subs and ships in different C boxes, you will of course use the lowest C box of the included ships in the convoy attack. So in our case, we have raiders that are in the 4 box. Now that would normally be a +4, but we're going to cap that at +3, which is going to give us a result range of anywhere from 9 to 4, since we're going to roll a d6 and we're going to add 3. Now, if there were escorts present, we would be looking at rolling on one of these other columns here, depending upon how many escorts there were, and we would be subtracting the escort's box number from the die roll as a negative modifier. So, for instance, if there were escorts in the 2 box, we would add 3 to the die roll for the raiders being in the 3 or 4 box, and then we would subtract 2 from that for a net +1 to the die roll. But in this case, it's just a straight die roll +3, and that's going to give us a result. So if we roll that, you can see we've got a 3. We add 3 to that, we get a 6. We come across here to the second column, we get a result. It's a -5 and then a large D. Now, in 5th edition, you can see the first result is applied to the convoy. The second is the number of resources lost, and the number on the far right would be any damage or results applied to the submarine. Now, this is where the slight modification comes in. Rather than the resources being lost, because the resources are transported at the beginning of the turn, if you recall, in the resource transportation segment. What this number is, we're going to treat this as the number of convoy points that are sunk. So in this case, we will have 5 convoy points sunk. We're going to basically ignore this left, the letter to the left side here, because it's not really going to apply to the convoy points. The number here is going to be the result applied to the convoy points. The resources will get through, and then on the right-hand side, we'll have any results applied to the submarines. Now, there are never any results that are applied to surface raiders. So in this case, there would be 5 convoy points sunk and a submarine damaged. But since there are no submarines involved, we only have surface raiders, we're going to ignore this damage result, and we will sink the only 2 convoy points that are in the sea zone. So that's just a real quick explication of how the chart works. And again, when I get into the dedicated video, we'll also talk about this subs versus ships and ships versus subs. These charts are going to be how submarines in this game will attack and interact with enemy surface ships, rather than doing it in the naval combat per the rules as written. So again, we'll get into that in more detail, but for now I'm going to go ahead and remove the 2 convoy points from the Baltic Sea. They're going to the bottom of it, and then we move on to the return to base and final reorganization. I'll go ahead and do the production as well, so we'll pick up once production's complete. We'll see what everybody's built for the upcoming turns. Well, I've wrapped up production for all of the major powers, so it just remains to be seen who built what. As far as U.S. entry goes, I had to roll against Germany and Japan, since they are each at war with Democrat powers. The roll for Germany did not increase the U.S. entry at all. However, for Japan, it did increase it by 3. So the U.S. is slowly starting to creep up to the point where they're getting closer and closer to being able to start to select some political options that unlock the sort of the standard WiF U.S. entry options. So that'll draw them deeper and deeper into what's happening around the world here as we move forward. I would think certainly by the middle towards the end of 1940, the U.S. will start to play a more noticeable role in things. With that said, production will start off with the fascists, and you may have noticed one of the house rules I've been using is I'm allowing major powers to go into debt for spending on political options, but not on building units. See, this is the first time I've done that in a game, and I want to see what the impact is, and we are starting to see it now this turn. You'll see what I mean here shortly. The Italians, for instance, they are producing 8 build points per turn. However, they were in quite a bit of a deficit going into this production phase from some of the political options they played recently, which means the only thing they did was start construction of a light cruiser for 1 build point. Germany is beginning to see some of the benefits of the conquests that she's done here in the West. Her production is now up to 14 build points, which is the highest of any of the major powers in the game. And with that, she is going to build a militia unit, a gun, which is in the form of an artillery piece, and build a twin-engine land and a single-engine fighter. That's a total of 11 build points. And with the build totals we see in this turn, all of the major powers now are sitting at 0 as far as money goes, with the exception of France, who is still at -4. So moving on to Japan. Japan is building at 11, and she built a militia as well, laid down a new fleet carrier, started construction on an amphib, trained a pilot, and built a single-engine naval air, and that's a total of 11 build points that Japan spent. For the communists, the Soviet Union is producing 8 build points, and they used that to build an armor corps and a cavalry corps. France, as I just mentioned, is still in debt even after their production of 6 build points now. They have lost a factory and a resource to the Germans in metropolitan France, which did impact their production a little bit. And we're seeing now the cost of France bringing in Belgium into the war rather than waiting for the Germans to declare war on Belgium and invade it, as well as declaring war on Germany itself. Those were very expensive political options that kind of came one right after the other. And France is, again, attempting to dig herself out of that financial hole. It's dried up all the money to be spent on units right at the point where they really need as many reinforcements going on the map as they can. So we'll see what happens moving forward, but the next couple of turns, it's going to be pretty rough for France, particularly if Germany can keep removing French units from the map. Now, moving on to the Commonwealth. Commonwealth is producing 11, just like Japan, and they will use all 11 of those this turn. They'll build a militia as well as an infantry corps and a single-engine fighter. They are going to lay down a new fleet carrier, and they are going to begin the second round on Illustrious and try and get her on the map by the beginning of next year. China is producing 5, and they are building a militia and an infantry unit. You can see as things are developing on the map, lots of powers are beginning to see the need for more infantry, more bodies in the front lines right now. So we're seeing a big increase in the amount of militia that's being produced. And that's going to bring us to the last of the major powers, the United States. They're currently producing 10 build points. Now, they had a bit of a surplus going into this turn, so they actually spent 12 build points. They began the first cycle of a battleship. They also began building an amphib. They started a light cruiser, and they started the second cycle of USS Boise. And then they spent 3 build points to build 3 carrier planes, and then finally they built 1 pilot. Now, the Spanish Civil War, the Republicans only have 2 build points, and while they have plenty of stuff in their force pools that they could build, they simply don't have anything that is only 2 build points, so nothing for the Republicans. Meanwhile, the Spanish nationalists have actually built out their force pools. They've got nothing in the cups to spend anything on, so there's no production there in Spain this turn. And that is going to wrap it up for a rather interesting January, February 1940, where a lot more happened on map than I was anticipating, thanks to some unusually good weather, and a run of good weather at that. So we'll be moving into March, April in the spring, where the weather should theoretically get better, but you never know. We could have some heavy rains in the springtime, which would certainly help out the French and the Commonwealth in France, and the Chinese in China. On another note, it looks like a lot of the real-world issues that have been impacting my ability to film and create videos are starting to resolve themselves, so I anticipate that I'll be able to get back to filming more regularly and get back to producing more videos and get those uploaded to the channel here over the next couple of weeks. So look for that. Also, maybe next up might be the dedicated video regarding my house rules concerning the use of submarines and convoy points. So that's going to wrap it up for today. Thanks for watching.